Hi everyone, Renee here. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my favorite video to film, my favorite video to watch, and that is my best books of the year, my top books of 2022. Also, peep my sweater and this cute little tumbler that I got gifted for Christmas. I'm obsessed with them as a Swiftie. And I figured since Taylor Swift is my top artist of the year on my Spotify, the creme de la creme, the best, I would wear this to also talk about the best books of the year, my favorite, the creme de la creme. So last year when I did this video, I did more like a list, like a ranking. But this year, I don't think I'm going to do that because one, I was in a massive slump this year and I did not read nearly as much as I wanted to. But that being said, I did read a lot of good books and I also read a variety of books. This was definitely a year that I kind of expanded my horizons with books. So I didn't feel comfortable ranking these because some of these I feel like you just can't put in comparison to others. And what I mean by that is like comparing a memoir to a fantasy or comparing a romance novel to a poetry collection. Like, I just feel like that is not something that I am able to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you them and kind of make it as like the best of the category almost, even though there are a few like multiples in a category. But you know what, I'm just gonna get started so that you know what I mean. I want to get closer. I want to be really close to you when I talk about these. Oh, it also has my name on it. Isn't that cute? So first, I feel obligated to start with this honorable mention, and the reason that I'm starting with this is because this is a book that I know 100% would have been in my top 10 if I finished it. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I thought I finished this book. Like, I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thought I finished this book. And then I realized I didn't. So when I was going through and putting books together for this list, I looked at this book and I was like, why is there a bookmark in it? And it's because I only made it like 300 something pages into it, because it's a long book. But that is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. Literally, I genuinely thought that I finished this. Like, I actually think I told my friends that I finished it. I didn't. Not because it was bad, just because of my slumps. Now, I did get about 300 something pages into this, so I am confident that this would have made it into my list because I was obsessed with this book as I was reading it. There's absolutely no reason that it should not be finished right now. This essentially is like Gossip Girl in high society London. It's a toxic relationship, but it's beautifully written. It is literally like Taylor Swift-esque quotes in this book. So I couldn't put this in any order, but I did want to just mention that even though I didn't finish this, it's such a good book. Next up, we're just gonna swing into a couple romances. The first one is actually the very first book that I read this year, which is super exciting to say, and that is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I read this like January 2nd of this year, and I was absolutely obsessed with it. And it's shocking to me because this is a book that I actually didn't want to read at first. Like, I was not interested in this. It was just a small town grumpy sunshine, and for some reason small town just didn't appeal to me last year. It does now. We have our main character Piper, who is like this rich socialite from LA, and she gets banished to this fishing town that her biological father was from, and her sister goes with her, and she ends up just getting to know the people of the town. She meets this really grumpy fisherman who you can only imagine is the love interest. There's just a lot of growth with these characters and a lot of development, and I really appreciate that because I feel like sometimes in rom-coms that's a little bit lacking, and especially in a book with a concept like this you would think that it would be lacking, but it wasn't, and I just really loved it. It made me swoon, it made me laugh, and it was a great way to kick off the year. Another romance that I also read in January of this year is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Everyone who's read this book and said that it was super emotional, they are correct, and I cried, and it was beautiful. And essentially, if you don't already know what this book is about, which I feel like most people do, it is a second chance romance, friends to lovers, childhood friends to lovers at that, and it is definitely a more emotional book. And I am so happy that I read this. I definitely want to reread it soon. So yes, this book, incredible, chef's kiss. And then I think this might be the last like romance novel that I have in here is Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover, and no one is as shocked as me that a Colleen Hoover book made it in my favorite books of the year, because to be honest, I have an extremely love-hate relationship with Colleen Hoover. We'll talk about that more in my next video that's gonna come out after this. But this book completely took me by surprise. I only read it because of the hype, and this is her newest book, and I just wanted to read it just to see what it was about. And oh, I cried a lot reading this. I think I cried more in this book than I cried in Love in Other Words, and that is crazy to me because it's Colleen Hoover. This sounds like a hate video. It's not. But this was so well done. This is about a woman who gets out of prison and she goes to this town to reconnect with her daughter. No one in this town wants her to have any connection with her daughter. And she ends up meeting this guy, and there's just this really emotional relationship development between the two, and then you also get the relationship build up with her daughter. My camera kind of cut for a second, but we're gonna keep going. But throughout the book, you're also getting kind of pieces of what happened that night that led to her being in jail. And it's just beautiful. It is just such a stunning book, and I just want everyone to read this. And honestly, I feel like even if you don't like Colleen Hoover, I feel like it's worth a shot. I'm not saying it's the best written book in the world, but oh my goodness, it really touched me, and I love it. Then moving into a different vein, I do have a thriller, which is so exciting to me because I very rarely give thrillers 5 stars. I don't know why, but I finally found one this year that was a 5-star, and it is so far, out of the 2 years that I've been reading thrillers, the only 5-star I've given to a thriller, and that is The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. I was obsessed with this, and I am like really defensive of this book because it is just, oh my god, it's so good. It's about, in this book, you're getting multiple timelines and multiple POVs, a timeline back in the past, a timeline in the current day of this woman, and a timeline that you actually don't really know where it is or who it is because it's so ominous. But then all of the timelines come together in this really gripping story. And I mean, it's not at all that shocking. I feel like I was able to predict things, and it's not really one of those books that's gonna give you a big wow at the end. But that being said, it is still so gripping and intriguing, and it's just a very, very well done story. I really, really liked this. I want to see this as a movie because I feel like it would be really, really creepy and also very impactful and thrilling. It's very thrilling, I say. Then moving on, we have a book that, if you were shocked at Colleen Hoover being in my top, then this might shock you even more. And that is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. It took me 4 tries to read this book over the past 2 years. I have tried. I literally thought that I gave up on Sarah J. Maas before this came out. And then when it came out, I was like, maybe I didn't. And then I read it the first time and I was like, I think I do. But then I was like, no, I want to try it again. And I literally started it 3 times, and I think I got to page 100 every single time, and I was like, I cannot do this because the first 100 pages are kind of boring. And I actually did not give this book 5 stars. I think this is one of the only books in this section here that I did not give 5 stars, but I gave it a 4 to a 4.5. Only reason I did not give it 5 is because the first 100 pages are hard to get through, clearly, with how long it took me to get through the full book. But once I took that plunge and went through the full book, it is fantastic. One of the best fantasies that I've read in a while. I love how intricate it is. I love the character development already in this one book. And it kind of made, towards the end, it made me realize that the first 100 pages and the first, like, probably 300 pages of world building were very, very worth it. Because without that build, I would not have felt as attached to the story and attached to the characters as I did by the end. And this is a chunky book. This book is 800 pages about, and it was so good. And now in 2023, I have to read House of Sky and Breath, and I'm so excited. And Miss Sarah J. Maas, I did not give up on you, and I do not give up on you yet. Then moving on, I think I want to go into a poetry collection that I read this year, and it holds a very fond place in my heart, and that is Film for Her by Orion Carlotto. And I read this book on a whim. I read it because of the film photography elements that are scattered throughout, because I am a photography major with a deep appreciation of that platform or art form, I guess I would say. And I feel like when you're reading poems like these with the actual film to go next to it that kind of has a story alongside the poem, it really impacts you. And even though this is more of a poetry collection about her growing up and like her life, it is still so intimate and raw, and there's definitely a couple poems in here that, even though they weren't like about my life, I felt like they could be applied to my life, and I was just very touched while reading this. I absolutely think this is such a beautiful poetry collection, one of my favorite poetry collections I've ever read. Then I'm gonna go into a different vein, and I'm gonna go into a memoir that I read this year, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And I'm pretty sure everyone has heard about this memoir at this point. This was very talked about when it came out, and it's such a bold title and a bold cover. And it was absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Like, the things that Jeanette McCurdy went through, like, reading it, it's like, wow. I listened to this on audiobook where she was narrating, so it kind of made that experience even better, listening to her go through it. But it was absolutely beautiful. It did have an edge of humor to it, like Jeanette's dry, sarcastic humor that just kind of added to it. But it was also heartbreaking and very I don't want to say gripping. Well, I guess I would say gripping. Impactful, I guess, is the right word. But it was stunning. I gave this 5 stars. It's hard to give a memoir a rating, but I know deep in my soul that this is a 5-star. Honestly, I think it's very bold and brave of Jeanette to share her story in this way. And I just really appreciate the fact that I was able to read it. Then I also want to talk about some manga. I'm not going to go too in depth, but I did have a couple new manga series that I read this year that I really loved. I'm only going to show the first volume. One is Your Name. This was absolutely stunning. It's only 3 volumes. I did actually bring all 3 volumes down here. It was beautiful. Like, I actually cried at the end of it. It's more like sci-fi slice of life romance type of manga, which kind of goes hand in hand with Orange, which is my favorite manga of all time. So I was really happy to read this. And then another one I really liked was Cheeky Brat. This is a basketball romance, kind of goes hand in hand with Waiting for Spring if you're a fan of that, and it's so funny. This is really funny, and I love the banter. So I am hoping to read the latest volume soon, but these 2 series right here definitely stole my heart this year as far as manga goes. Then I quickly want to talk about another book. This is the only other book that I'm going to mention that I didn't give 5 stars, but it's like a 4 to a 4.5, and I do still think about it pretty frequently. I think actually out of all the books I read this year, this is one of the most memorable, which is crazy that I didn't give it 5 stars. This is gonna be a spoiler alert because I read this in a video that I literally started filming in March, and I still haven't uploaded it yet. I finally haven't finished filming, but because of my constant reading slumps, I was just not able to finish this to upload. But I did read Almond this year. And I read it for a book where I'm reading books inspired by K-pop idols, and that one will be coming soon. This is, I guess, more of like a literary fiction type of book. We follow a boy who has this medical disorder where he is unable to feel emotion, and you're following him through his life. There's this traumatic thing that happens when he was a child, and he didn't really show any emotion, no tears, no crying, and it's kind of just going through his life of like everyone thinking he's weird and him being very misunderstood. But it's such a beautiful story. Like, I did cry when I read this, and I just think about it all the time because it's not like anything I've ever read before, and it's really hard to kind of put into words outside of that, but I think it's something that everyone should give a shot just to kind of see, because this is a very beautiful book. It is a Korean book, and I am just very happy that I read it this year. And then lastly, I just quickly want to talk about a Christmas rom-com that I read this past month, and I think it's great because I gave it 5 stars, and I never do that with holiday rom-coms, I should say. For some reason, they don't always vibe well with me, but this one did, and this is The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Lise, or Lise, I'm not quite sure. But I gave this 5 stars, and it was so sweet and good. It's rival booksellers, kind of like enemies to lovers. It's Grumpy Sunshine. He hates Christmas. She loves Christmas. There's a lot of good representation, LGBT and autism rep in here as well. And it is so heartwarming and perfect for Christmas. And I'm so glad that I was able to read this season and love it. So next year, if you're looking for a good Christmas read and you haven't read this, I highly recommend it. 5 stars. So there you have it. Those are the best books that I read this past year. I read a lot of good books, and there definitely were a couple others that I kind of wanted to talk about, but I didn't want to make this super long. I wanted to keep this just the ones that stood out the absolute most, the best of the best, and that is what I came up with. So let me know if you read any of these books, if you liked any of these books, and let me know some of your favorites of the year that maybe you think I would like that I didn't mention or didn't read. And yeah, with that being said, I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to thumbs up down below to help support this channel, and also subscribe to follow me on my reading journey. I will let you in on a clue. My worst books of the year will be coming next. So if you love rants and the negative side of things, you can go ahead and stay tuned for that. And also, like always, all of my socials will be linked down below: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, the works. And yeah, once again, I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!